In this week's episode of A Dryer Dose of Disney, Jared shares tips and tricks for working remotely from the parks.
Welcome to this week's episode of A Dryer Dose of Disney. I'm your host, Jared Dryer, and today we have an exciting episode for you. As I've said on some of my previous episodes, we're going to be a little bit more sporadic in the episodes that we release onto our podcast and out there on YouTube. And a lot of that's because we've covered so many awesome topics that are out there. There's already 80 plus episodes out there on our YouTube page or on our podcast or wherever you're listening to us. And we've covered a lot of the cool ideas that are already out there. And we wanted to make sure you guys have up-to-date information. So we will update some of those episodes as we're going forward. But we're always looking for new ideas and topics to cover. And from the series that we've started a few weeks ago, we're going to keep talking about traveling internationally to different Disney parks. And in fact, in a couple months here, our family's going to be going to Disneyland Paris. And we're so excited about that. And we've already done some episodes on planning for that. But what we'll do is as soon as that trip is completed and we're back home, we will give you updates on the foods that we ate, the rides that we rode there. And we'll talk all the exciting things about Disneyland Paris. And then the next place we're going to start planning. Like I said, on some of those episodes, we're going to be planning some episodes more sporadically in between. And we're always looking for new topics to cover. By all means, if any of you are listening to this podcast regularly and you've got some topics we haven't covered yet, please reach out to us over on Facebook at A Dryer Dose of Disney. We'd love to hear those ideas and some different topics that we can include on future podcasts, and we would love to cover those for you. But in the meantime, one of my friends came up to me and said, "Hey, Jared, what you should really cover is talking about what it's like to work from the parks." And this is something I've done a few different times with our condo in Orlando, mostly because I can work remotely, and I work remotely even here at home in Denver. So what we've done is there's been a couple times that we've been out there in Orlando, and we've gone to the parks early in the day. Obviously, we're a couple hours ahead of Denver, and we've been able to knock out some cool rides, maybe grab lunch, and then we'll head back to our condo so that I can spend the rest of the day working. But there's been a few times when either I didn't have a meeting first thing in the morning, or maybe I had a really short meeting first thing in the morning, and then I had a couple hour break that I could then spend in the parks. And we would take advantage of that time and do that. And I would be working remotely just for a couple hours first thing in the morning, just due to the time difference there in Orlando. So I've had the chance to do this. And a lot of people that I know are curious, how does it work? What's the best way to do this? And what are some tips and tricks that you have for working in the parks? So I figured, why not put together an episode on this and talk to those parents that may be taking their kids on vacation. And whether you're self-employed or maybe you have a job that allows you to work remotely, or even in the cases where you're on vacation, you've taken the time off, but you want to stay plugged into the office, what are the best ways to work remotely while you're at the parks? Now, we're going to cover all the parks for you. So we're going to be covering all the parks, both in Orlando and over in California. But we want to provide you with the places that you're going to find privacy, a little bit of a quieter atmosphere, and maybe a chance to sit down and plug in if you ever need to. So this is going to be a perfect episode for you if you're in that situation. Now, before I dive into it, I do want to ask, wherever you're listening to this podcast or if you're watching it on YouTube, click pause and find that subscribe button. So that way, as we do our episodes, since they're not happening every single week right now, you're going to be alerted to that and you're going to get those updates into your inbox each and every single time. And if you like this show or this show has given you some tips or tricks that have saved you money, we would love your support over at Patreon. You can find that down in the links below in the podcast description or on the YouTube description. And you can throw a couple bucks our way to say thank you. And if you want our biggest tip or trick ever that we've ever released for Disney, that is only available on our top tier. This is something we didn't want getting out to the general public, so we did put it at the highest tier level out there, but definitely a great opportunity to learn some more tips and tricks through our Patreon site. So working from the parks, let's dive into it. Let's talk about what works and what doesn't work and what I have found in my experience. Obviously, when you're listening to this episode, if you don't work remotely, so for example, my wife is a teacher, she doesn't have to work remotely. Obviously, she can't. She's so tied into her class when she's here in Denver and very engaged with those students that when she's on vacation or away from school, that's when we go to the park. So she's never going to have that opportunity to work remote. You may be thinking, hey, people try to work remotely. Yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there that actually you can do remotely, especially if you're self-employed. Maybe you're a broker of some sort. So whether you're an insurance broker or a stock broker or you're a mortgage broker, You may not have the confines of having to work from a set office every single day. You may be doing orders by the phone or taking your computer or smartphone with you where you can execute those orders or take care of your customers that way. And you may be working from the parks while you're out there with your family on vacation. So there are a lot of people that take that opportunity to take care of a couple things at the same time with their family and doing work. But often a lot of people like myself, I usually take PTO when I'm going to be headed into the parks and spend some time over there. But like I said, because we have our condo in Orlando, there are a lot of times that we go in early in the day just because we're a couple hours ahead. We can knock out a couple of the big rides, maybe grab some food, and then we'll leave because we have annual passes and we're able to do that. So it really depends on if your job allows you to do that or if you have the opportunity to, and if you're able to work more mobile than others. So for example, if you work in landscaping, you probably can't work from the parks. But if you're able to work from a smartphone or your own device, or even if you have a laptop, I've done that a couple times where I've taken laptops with me into the parks. There's ways to do it. There's ways to accomplish this, and there's ways to meet those deadlines and meet those expectations of your job. And that's what I'm here to help you with today. Now, I'm going to take you through later in the episode. We're going to go park by park, and I'm going to tell you the best places that I have found to work because I have done it at each and every single park. But I also want to give you some tips before we get to that point. And the tips that I want to give you are starting out with Wi-Fi. So both Disney and Universal have their on-site Wi-Fi that you can use in the parks as well as at the resorts. They are a little bit different because we have stayed at the resorts as well as been in the parks. And what I mean by that is if you're in the hotels, they're a little less restrictive in the hotels because it's for their guests. They understand that guests may need to work or may need to do some things while they're there on site. And so the hotels are going to be a little bit easier to work from. So if you have a jam-packed day, and what I mean is you have back-to-back meetings all day that you just can't do the parks that day, I'm going to encourage you, stay in the hotel, find a spot there. You can even talk to the concierge desk. They usually have a working space that you can borrow and use while you're there, but you're going to want to stay there just because it's easier to have access. The Wi-Fi works a lot better. You're going to have an ability to plug in your computer if you need to, but the hotel's probably going to be easier. Once you get into the parks, the Wi-Fi becomes a little bit more restrictive. And what I mean by that is not every site or every app works. I can't tell you which ones do and which ones don't because I don't have a list of them. You may be able to Google it and find it out there on the internet, but I don't have access to one right now. I can tell you from my own experience that sites like using my mail app, and that's going to pull all of my personal email accounts, but I do have Outlook for work, and that works in the parks. I do have WebEx that works in the parks. I've used Microsoft Teams in the parks on their Wi-Fi. That all works. Now, if you have an app or some software that you need to use that is proprietary or may not work in the parks, do know that the cell signals at the parks are pretty good. And so if you're able to do it from your smartphone, or if you can use your smartphone as your hotspot, then it will probably still work for you when you're out there. But do know that the Wi-Fi can be a little bit more restrictive in the parks. And that's because they're limiting that bandwidth and capacity due to the thousands and thousands of people in the park, all sharing the same Wi-Fi, all sharing that bandwidth. So they do try to restrict it down so that no one is hogging it and using a large piece of that bandwidth out there. It is a little bit more difficult to be on the Wi-Fi in some cases, depending on the software. And like I said, I gave you some softwares that have worked. I've had a couple things that haven't worked, but they weren't necessarily needed. At the end of the day, just know that you may need to go test it out. So I do want to caution you, have a backup plan. Don't ever go into the parks thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to just log in on their Wi-Fi and it's going to work. That's why I said use your cell phone as a hotspot. That may enable you to get past what the Wi-Fi may limit you on. So always have a backup plan when you're going. Like I said, the cell phone coverage is pretty good, so you shouldn't have any problem with that. So tips and tricks when you're in the parks. Here's the way that I like to work from the parks is starting with email. Okay. So a lot of jobs obviously use email and electronic communication, maybe chat as a feature at their company where they're communicating with one another through different departments. You can do email and chat and those kind of things. And I really like to do it when I'm in line waiting in queue for a ride. So for example, when we go to any of the parks, we're going to rope drop our most important ride or the ride that we think will save us the most time. And we're going to tackle that as soon as we get there, and we're not going to be waiting in line. After that, though, chances are is we're going to be waiting in line, even if it's as short as 5 or 10 minutes early in the day or at the end of the day or throughout the middle of the day, maybe it's 45 minutes or longer. Waiting in line is something you're going to be doing throughout your entire day. And that is a great time to stop and check your email, especially if you're doing it frequently. Don't think about it as taking yourself away from your family, especially if you're doing it really frequently, because what I have found is I wait in the line and I'll check my email real quick and I may only have one or two. Sometimes I don't even have to respond. Sometimes it's just somebody letting me know something and I'm able to just delete it and keep going on with my day. And it may only take me 2 minutes. And then maybe 20 minutes later, I'll check it again to make sure I've got my finger on the pulse of what's going on at work, just to make sure that I'm engaged with my staff and with my team and that I'm not missing anything. But usually I don't have any emails. And then we'll go ride our ride and then we'll go to our next one. And we may wait again another 20 minutes and then I'll pull it up again. And maybe I've got one email. So emails are best tackled when you're waiting in queue for the rides. That's what I have found is the easiest time to do it because you're usually not doing anything else. And it's usually quick and easy to do. And the more frequently you do it, you're not going to get stacked up. So I really love that. It's enabled us to keep moving throughout our day. As on some of our other episodes, we've talked about waiting in line and doing your mobile order and stuff like that. I really find being in queue is a great time to knock out things on my device and make sure that I'm taking care of what needs to be done for the rest of my day or at work back home. So emails, super easy to do. But maybe you have a meeting or you have a call or you have some kind of deadline you need to work on. Then you may need to find a place that you can be isolated for a little bit, maybe in a quieter environment. And that's where we want to give you the tips and tricks for where to go in each of the parks. So I have gone to each and every one of these locations at one time or another. I can tell you these are all tested, tried, and true. I absolutely love each and every one of them. And in fact, I'm going to give you a place not to go on one of them that I've heard a lot of people recommend because I tried it and it was absolutely awful. But without any further ado, let's dive into the parks and where to go. So I'm going to start with everyone's number one park, and that's Magic Kingdom in Orlando. And we'll do all the Orlando parks, all 4 Disney, and then the 2 Universal. And then we'll hop over to Anaheim, and I'll tell you about those. But Magic Kingdom in Orlando is actually one of my favorite parks to do this from. And it's because you do have multiple places you can go to, depending on where you're at in the park, that have AC and that they're covered. And that's something that's really important in Orlando is it can rain sporadically, especially in the summer months in the afternoons. And if you are outdoors, say sitting on a park bench, and all of a sudden it starts to pour, you may be scrambling trying to find cover. And if you've got a computer out, that could be disaster. So I'm going to recommend you're always going to want to go indoors. You're always going to want to find AC and a place that's going to be really quiet. So at Magic Kingdom, I have found 2 great locations. And the first is Pecos Bill's restaurant. Now, this is over towards Splash Mountain and where now Tiana's is going to be. But Pecos Bill's is a great restaurant. It's indoors. There's a ton of seating. And if you didn't know this, they actually have an upstairs. Usually the upstairs is marked off and roped off so that you can't get up there because they don't really need it because the parks are never at a capacity level where they need to open that up. But there is a ramp you can start going up, but there is some seating throughout this entire restaurant. And it's always easy to find a seat in there unless it's lunchtime. And it's cool, it's quiet, and it's really relaxed in there. So even if it's pretty full, you can usually find a corner that it's going to be a little bit quieter in that you can sit down and do your work. My second recommendation is going to be the Harbor House there at Magic Kingdom. Now, this is over by the Haunted Mansion and the Colonial America area. And the reason I love the Harbor House is this one does usually have the second story open for you. Not many people ever go up to the second floor. In fact, when you walk in there, it's not intuitive to find the second floor. A lot of people are going to be walking around the first floor looking for places to sit. And there's a whole outdoor seating area as well. So if they don't find seating on the first floor, they're usually going to walk outside and go find seating out there. And they don't turn and look that there are actually stairs that go upstairs. And there's a whole other seating area up there. So when you're up there, it's usually really quiet. There's very few people up there. It's air conditioned. You're indoors. And this is a great place to go as well. So those are my 2 recommendations at Magic Kingdom is Pecos Bill and Harbor House. Both indoors. You're going to love them and they're easy to do work from. Second, let's go to Epcot. And this is where I'm going to tell you where not to go. So when I started looking for places, everyone was recommending the Connections Cafe, which is in the center of the front side of the park. So between all of the different pavilions, the Land, Guardians of the Galaxy, Mission Space, Test Track, in that center area is where the Connections Cafe is. And everybody said to go there because there's so many different booths and seating areas. And that's true. There's a lot of places to sit. But what I have found is every time I've got into the Connections Cafe, it is completely swamped. It is super busy. It is the only place within the park that has a genuine Starbucks. And because of that, it is just crazy busy all the time. And I've not liked working from there. In fact, last time that we were there, we had our flight canceled from Orlando back to Denver due to a snowstorm in Denver. And that was the quickest place we could run into because it was starting to rain, and call our airline, which was Southwest, and get that all figured out. So we ended up working from Connections Cafe to call Southwest and get our planes changed. And it was loud. It was very difficult to hear the agent. It wasn't a lot of fun to have that conversation in there. So I can tell you, don't read what they say online. Connections Cafe is not the place to go. In fact, I'm going to give you 3 different places you can go to at Epcot that are all better than Connections Cafe. So if you're in the front of the park, I'm going to tell you to head over to the Land Pavilion. And in the Land Pavilion, go downstairs. Right in the center is the Sunshine Seasons Cafe. And there is a ton of seating down there. Now, this is between Living with the Land and Soarin'. It can be a little bit loud in there because you're indoors and there's a lot of people walking through, but there's not a lot of people stopping and sitting, which definitely helps with the noise levels. Again, this is indoors. It's air conditioned. That's going to help you a ton. And it's a pretty easy place to find a seat and to work from. The second place is going to be in Canada. If you are out in the World Showcase now, I'll tell you to head over to Canada, go into the back. And there's 2 ways to get into the back of Canada. You can either take the pathway over by Le Cellier, or you can walk up the stairs into the shops. And then there's stairs that go down the backside of that towards where the waterfall is. And down in the bottom back there, there's a show that tells you all about Canada. Now, the cool thing is you can walk into the lobby, and the lobby is very long and extensive. And not many people go to the show. Not many people are interested to go see the show for Canada. So because of that, throughout, let's say you're down there for an hour. Throughout that hour, the show runs about every 20 minutes. You may see a dozen people walk in, but usually it's very calm down there. It's super quiet. It is dark, so I will warn you about that. If you're going to be on a video call, it is dark down there, so they may not be able to see you very well. But it's cool. It's indoors. It's relaxing. Nobody's going to bother you. I've taken a handful of calls down there and it's all worked out very well. So I really like the backside of Canada. The third and final place is going to be back in Morocco. So say now you've passed the France Pavilion, you're moving on through the World Showcase. In Morocco, you can go all the way into the back, wind back there. Nobody ever goes back there. There's only a couple of seats. So that is one problem, is it is a little bit limiting in seats. But you can sit back there. I've taken a call back there as well. It's super quiet. No one's going to bother you at all. The downside is you are not indoors. It is outdoors. So it's going to be hot. And if it ever starts to rain on you, you're going to be subject to the weather. But that is a quick last-ditch effort place that I like to go to if I need it and if we're winding around the World Showcase. Epcot, there's 3 great locations for you there. And in fact, I'll even say at Epcot, there's probably even more. Those are just my 3 go-to that I look for. Now, Hollywood Studios. Hollywood Studios is actually, I think, a little bit of a challenge because I have only found one really good place to set up shop and to work for just a little bit. And that is over at Pizza Rizzo over in the Muppets area. So this is between Star Tours and when you're going back to the Black Spire Outpost at Galaxy's Edge. There's that little outcropping there that looks like a little New York City. And that is where the Muppets 4D is. And that's where Pizza Rizzo is and Mama Melrose. So I encourage you to go into Pizza Rizzo. There is here also a second floor and nobody goes up there at all. So if you go up to the second floor, you're indoors, you're in the AC. It is a counter service restaurant. So you can come and go as you like, but it's going to be pretty quiet in there. It's going to be relaxing. You can go sit in a booth up there and get some work done without anyone ever bothering you. Now, throughout the rest of the park at Hollywood Studios, there's not a lot of good places. You could, if you wanted to, take a call out on the backside of the Tower of Terror. That's a pretty desolate place, meaning not a lot of people go back there. But pretty much the rest of the park throughout the entire area is going to be jam-packed with people. It's going to be busy. There's not a lot of great places to go that are going to be really quiet for you. So I'm definitely going to recommend Pizza Rizzo is my go-to place over at Hollywood Studios. Wrapping up Disney Orlando at the Disney World is going to be over at Animal Kingdom. And Animal Kingdom is by far, I think, the toughest place to find a place to sit. And it's because there's no good indoor space. So as you saw, as we went through Magic Kingdom, they had 2 great indoor places. Epcot, I gave you 2 good indoor. Hollywood Studio only had 1. Animal Kingdom doesn't have really any good indoor space. You can go to the Cantina over in the Pandora area. That's not a bad place. There are a few seats in there, but it gets so busy over in Pandora that it's not worth it. So I would definitely say stay away from the Cantina. But if you needed to early or late in the day and you weren't around mealtime, that's not a bad place to do it indoors. And back in the back of the park, if you took the train to Rafiki's Planet Watch, you may find a spot back there that's easy to get some peace and quiet and do some work indoors. But for the most part, this park is very outdoors. It's very animal centric. So they want you out in the elements. They want you walking around. All of the restaurants other than the Cantina, and then you've got a couple over in Dinoland today, all the other restaurants are table service. So they don't want you walking in there and just sitting down and taking over a table and working. The Cantina is going to probably be your best bet if you need to get indoors. But what I have found to be the best place to work from is behind the Bengal Barbecue. So this is on the Discovery Island. It's in the center of the park, which is nice. So regardless of where you're at during your day, if you need to go find someplace, heading to Discovery Island is always going to be really easy to find. But you can go to the Bengal Barbecue. And then behind that, if you've not been back there, is just a huge grouping of different areas where you can sit. And all of these areas are covered. So that's good. It'll keep you out of the rain. And I have had a call where it was absolutely pouring. And this is a day that I brought my laptop with me. I had multiple calls. So I sat there and did my multiple calls. And it was absolutely pouring the entire time I did. So I was thrilled that I was under a covered space and able to take my calls, interact with all the teams, and do what I needed to do while our friends and family were in the park because we had guests with us. And they were doing all the rides and experiencing all the stuff. And then a few hours later, I was able to shut it all down and go meet up with them and then do dinner because it was towards the end of the day. That was a great place to go. Now, when you do go walk through there, know that there are multiple places to sit. So you don't have to sit at the first one you find. There are places, this thing winds around for a little bit, and there's places up above. There's places down below, most of which all have covers. So I encourage you, walk around, find a quiet place. And then once you find a quiet place, what I like is I will go sit like towards the corner. So I'm out of the way. So if a family does come to eat, they're usually going to sit in the middle or towards the front of that section. They're not going to come back and pull up the table right next to me. And being in the corner, then I've got a background of trees or something behind me, or maybe they can see the rain if it starts to rain, and they're not going to see the people walking around behind me. So that's a quick little tip is I like going into the corner of one of those areas back there. But the Bengal Barbecue is going to be the best place. And that's my go-to. Anytime I need to do something from Animal Kingdom, I go to the Bengal Barbecue. So let's talk Universal, because Universal, honestly, is a lot more difficult than Disney. So Disney at least has places you can go to. Universal, it's a lot more difficult. So the two parks at Universal are Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios. So starting at Islands of Adventure, this is most people's go-to park. This is their favorite park of the two. There are really only two great places that I found. So if you want quiet, the best quiet place that I can tell you is go over into Dr. Seuss Land. And when you get in there, right when you walk in is Green Eggs and Ham, which is a stand. But if you walk to the left side of that, there's a little walkway that's actually a shortcut through that land, but it winds around and not many people go down that walkway. And there are some tables hidden back there. So I encourage you to go sit over there. You're not going to see a lot of people. And if you do sit, you can sit with your back to the lake. So that way, if you need to set up a computer or do a call, they can see the lake behind you. You're not going to see people walking by you, but you are going to be outside. So you are going to be exposed to the elements. You are going to be exposed to the sun. It can get very hot out there. So it's not something that I would encourage you to do a lot, but it's great for that quick phone call if you need to take it. My go-to place at Islands of Adventure is going to be the Fantastic Four Pizza. That is obviously over in the Superhero Island part of the park. So right over by the Hulk roller coaster. And in fact, it's right underneath it. And if you go underneath the Hulk roller coaster, you can find Fantastic Four Pizza. The reason I like this is there's a lot of seating in there, and a lot of people go counterclockwise through this park. So they usually start over in Seuss Land and they run through it to get to Harry Potter World, and they work their way counterclockwise. And the reason that's important is the last land that they get to is Superhero Land, meaning that if they're eating throughout the day, chances are they're already full and they don't need a full meal over there in Superhero Land. So because of that, Fantastic Four Pizza is not ever too busy unless it's raining outside. Then a lot of people will run in there because there's good shelter and there's lots of tables to sit. But you can go into Fantastic Four Pizza. It's going to be air conditioned. It's going to probably be quiet unless it's mealtime. And that's a great place to work from over there. Now, also at Islands of Adventure, if you're an annual pass holder, they do have their annual pass holder lounge. And I've talked to the people in there and they said, hey, if you're an annual pass holder and you need to take a phone call or do a quick WebEx or something, by all means, you are welcome to come in here. And there are a few tables in the back there. And they said you can use those at your leisure whenever you need to. And we'll make sure that nobody's bothering you. So That's another option, but again, only for annual pass holders. So just a quick call out there. Now let's go back over to the Universal Studio side. This one I even think is a little bit more difficult. So really, you've got two places to go. They're both going to be a little bit busier. They're both going to be a little bit louder. The first one is between Men in Black and then the Harry Potter land. So as you go over to Harry Potter land, they've got London and then Diagon Alley. But right between those there's a restroom over there. We always frequent that restroom. We think that's a really clean one. It's a good one to go to. But back behind that restroom is a walkway between those two lands. There's a little amphitheater back there. They usually have the amphitheater roped off so you can't get back in there. But there are some park benches over there. So we like to go sit over there. My wife does not like the Men in Black because it does spin. And so she's going to usually get a butter beer and she's going to sit on those benches and wait for us over there. And it's a great quiet place that then she can update her Facebook and post some pictures and stuff. But I found it's also a great place to take a phone call because it's not loud at all. So you're not going to have anyone screaming behind you. No one's going to walk around behind you. So that's my go-to there, honestly, even more than my second choice, though it is outside and it is exposed to the elements. The only inside place, and it's going to be loud, it's going to be chaotic, is over in Simpsons Land. You do have Cletus's Chicken Shack as well as some of the other fast food places, the Krusty Burger. You can go in there and it's like a food court, but there's a ton of seating and you can usually find a seat. I'm going to caution you though, when you go in there, it's loud. There's cartoons playing everywhere. It looks very funny in there. So if you're on a video call, people are going to notice that. They're going to see it. They're going to hear it. But if you do need to get out of the elements, this is a place you can go find a table pretty easily if you need to. I don't love it. It's not my number one recommendation. There were better places, but now that they're doing all the construction over by ET and they're going to be building stuff out, hopefully they reopen some of that up and there's some great places over there. But as of today, those aren't available for you. Now, let's hop over to California real quick, and I'm going to walk you through it over there. The good news is in California is it doesn't get as hot and it doesn't rain as often. So being indoors isn't as crucial in California as it is in Orlando. And that actually plays out because a lot of the places I'm going to recommend aren't indoors. There's just not as much availability to get indoors in California as there is in Orlando. But let's start at Disneyland. And my favorite place is the Fantasyland Theater. And this is actually between It's a Small World and Toontown. So as you're walking towards Toontown, you're going to go underneath the railroad tracks over there. It's immediately to your left if you're walking into Toontown. And there's some restrooms over there, but over that little hill by the restrooms is actually a big amphitheater. And they do have a tent covering if you need it. And if nothing is going on that day, and they'll have a sign out front that's going to tell you showtimes. If nothing's going on, that's a great place to sit because no one's ever in there and it's super quiet back there. And you do get that tent covering. Now, throughout the year, they're going to have different like high school bands or maybe a choir or singing group come to Disneyland, and they're going to perform in a parade or some different event. A lot of times they'll perform at the Fantasyland Theater as well. So you may see between 2 to 4 is going to be these 2 different choirs that are going to sing, but the rest of the day is wide open. So do check that out. We do love Fantasyland Theater. That's a great place to go. And they don't mind if you go back there and just sit if you're taking a phone call or something like that. That's an awesome place. My second recommendation, and the one that I like to use, is the Hungry Bear restaurant. So this is over by Splash Mountain going towards Galaxy's Edge. Over by Pooh Corner is the Hungry Bear restaurant. So it's on that side of the park. And they also have a second story up on the balcony up there. It's an outdoor deck and you can go sit up there. Plenty of tables, tons of tables. You are going to be exposed to the elements, but by being up on that deck, you're never going to see people walking behind you, especially if you get off to the side. You can set up with a scenic background if you need to, and it's usually going to be a little bit quieter over there. So we love that one as well. Over across the street, over at California Adventure, this one is really tough. But we have found at the back of the pier area, so you have Pixar Pier, where you've got the Incredicoaster, you've got the Toy Story Midway Mania. If you keep going a little bit further back, you're going to find 2 different restaurants, the Paradise Garden Grill and Boardwalk Pizza, and they have a whole bunch of outdoor tables. Now, before noon, this place is dead quiet. So if it's in the morning, that is a great place to go and work because no one's going to be over there. It's super quiet. No one's found their way to the backside of the pier yet, and you're going to find a table to sit at. Most of the tables have an umbrella that's going to help you get out of the sun. If you can find one in the shade, that's going to be great. But it is all outdoors. Now, come lunchtime, it's going to get a little bit busier, and you may need to find another place. The second area is very similar, and this is going to be over in the Big Hero 6 area. They have a kind of a food court out over there by the wharf where they've got all these tables in the center, tons of seating. So that's great. You can always find a seat there. But the challenge is going to be, it's going to be very loud and very busy. And you're not going to find a great place that you're not going to have people walking behind you if you need to do a video call. So that's a little bit of a challenge over there. You could go into, they have the animation studio at California Adventure where you can learn to draw the different characters. There are a couple of nooks and crannies in that building over there that you may find a place to just go sit on the ground and take a call if you need to be indoors in an AC. But there's so many people walking through there, so it didn't quite make my list as a top place to go. Now, over at Universal Studios Hollywood, this one's even worse. This is a very small park. If you've ever been there, this park can be done very easily in half a day, but it's very small. It's very tight. There's not a lot of great indoor spaces or restaurants. So what I have found to be the best place is over in the Illumination part of the park. So this is where your Minions, Minion Mayhem ride is. This is Secret Life of Pets. They do have the whole outdoor carnival area for all the little kids. If you can get over onto that side of the park, this is on the upper lot, and get into that back corner. And even if you go towards where the Secret Life of Pets is, and then keep going down that little back street over there, you may find a place that's going to be really quiet and away from others. But do know there's going to be a lot of kids in this area that are going to be loud running around. Before they built the Secret Life of Pets, this is where they used to have a little amphitheater, and they would do the Blues Brothers shows and Beetlejuice. It was perfect back then. But since they built Secret Life of Pets and built that out just a little bit more, it's a little bit of a tighter space. But if you can get down that little back street over there, it may be pretty quiet for you, and you might find a great place to work. Outside of that, I encourage you, you can leave and go into City Walk. There's quite a few restaurants and quick service places in City Walk that you could get indoors and maybe find a seat, especially if it's early in the day. But outside of that, it's going to be really difficult at Universal Hollywood. So that now leads us to our I Can Do This All Day tip of the day, which is on my water bottle back here. We've got some really cool merch at our Etsy store if you want to go check that out. But we like to give you the tip that's going to help you get through your day and help make it the best day possible. And our tip of the day is get some really good noise canceling headphones. So whether those are Bose or maybe your Apple AirPods are noise canceling, or you found some off-brand ones or some Beats by Dre, there's a lot of different noise canceling headphones that are out there. We encourage you to get a really good pair of them and take those with you to the park. Now, obviously, earbuds are easier to carry around in your pocket, but they may not be as good at the noise canceling as the bigger can headphones like the ones that I'm wearing right now. So do keep that in mind. But if you can bring some headphones with you, that will make taking calls 10 times easier because you can cancel out all the background noise and you can actually hear what the other person's trying to tell you. Where if you're just holding your phone or holding it up to your ear, you're not going to hear very well because the parks are loud. There's a lot of commotion going on. Those headphones are going to save you a ton. I like to take my headphones in with me just in case every single time. And that way, if somebody from work ever calls me, even if I'm off for the day, if someone from work calls me or a family member needs to get a hold of me and they need to talk, I can just pull out my earbuds, throw those in real quick, and I can pick up the call, and then it will help eliminate the background noise and I can hear them really well. And so that's going to be our tip of the day. That's going to help you engage on those calls just a little bit better. But with that, we wish you a magical week as you're planning your next vacation. Like I said, we're always looking for topics that you would like to hear us cover. So please find us over on Facebook if you have any other questions or have topics that you'd like to hear about, and we will make sure to get an episode out for those. But we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.